Hello, I'm Kate and I'm going to show you how to make a gingerbread house. It's going to look amazing as a centerpiece on any Christmas table, and it's going to be something the kids are going to love getting involved in. So first of all, I need to make the dough for the gingerbread house, and for that in this pan I've melted 250 grams of butter, 200 grams of muscovado sugar, I've got 4 tablespoons of golden syrup and 2 tablespoons of treacle, and I'm melting them very slowly on the heat. And what I want to do is melt all that butter, mix it together and allow it to cool slightly. So while that's melting in the pan, what I've got here is 600 grams of plain flour, and to that I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of bicarbonate of soda. I've got 2 teaspoons of freshly ground ginger, and 2 teaspoons of mixed spice. So I'll just give these a little stir to mix all those lovely spices together. I'm going to turn the heat off this and just give it a stir because it's melted and I need to allow it to cool slightly before I add it to my flour mixture. But I just want to make sure all that sugar's dissolved and all those ingredients are mixed together. The smell of the muscovado sugar and the treacle together with that butter, it smells really Christmassy already. What I'm going to do is allow that to cool down ever so slightly while I just mix the spices and the bicarbonate of soda into this plain flour. And what I need to do is pour that liquid mixture over the flour and mix it together to make a dough. I'm ready to add this to my flour. Just give it an extra stir to make sure it's all mixed together. I can lose that spoon. And then we can pour this liquid mixture over our flour very carefully. Make sure it all goes in. There we go. And give it a good stir. Now I've got an extra 25 grams of flour weighed out in this bowl here because I want to make sure that my dough isn't too sticky or too dry, so it's always a good idea to hold a little bit of the flour back. So it could require a total of 625 grams of flour in total, but I think this might be enough. So just using your wooden spoon, make sure all that flour is incorporated. And then when we're nearly there, I'll get my hands in. And the best way to test if you need more flour or not is get your hands in and squeeze the dough together. And it should be quite smooth. And if it's too sticky, you just add a little bit more flour, but that's just right. Now, a really useful tip when you're rolling out your dough is to have a piece of greaseproof paper. I'm actually going to roll the dough straight out onto here. So I'll take a piece of the dough, give it a good squeeze together, and then lay it onto my paper. So I shouldn't need any extra flour at this stage because this is going to stop it sticking to my worktop. Let's move these out of the way. And then using my rolling pin, very carefully roll out the dough, just a little bit thicker than a £1 coin. And that looks about right. And what I've got here are the templates that I'm going to use to cut out the panels for my house. And it's a really good idea to use cardboard because it's nice and sturdy. And what I've done is I've measured out the side panel, and I'll need to cut out 2 of these. I've got my gable ends, which are here, and again I will need to cut out 2. And these larger pieces are for the roof, so I'll need to cut out 2 roof panels as well. So if I use the side panel here, I place it on top of my dough, and then using a knife I'm going to cut around the edge like so. And you need to be quite accurate because you want these panels to all stick together when they're baked. There we go. So I'll remove these extra pieces. And remember, when you've got all your panels, which will be 6 in total, any extra dough that you have, it's great for making Christmas trees like I've done on this one here, perhaps a chimney, a door, windows. Just use the dough to cut out shapes for baking after. So I'll take off my template carefully here. So what I'm going to do with this panel, put it on a baking sheet, and it's easy to transfer as you can see. I need to roll out the rest of my house panels, and they'll be baked in an oven, preheated oven, 180 degrees, for about 8 to 10 minutes. What you want to do is make sure that the dough is starting to colour around the outside, so you've got this lovely crisp golden biscuit. So we'll come back to those in a minute. So the house smells of gingerbread. It actually smells fantastic, and I've allowed these panels to cool completely on a cooling rack. The next stage is to assemble the house. This is definitely the fun bit. So what I'm going to do is start off with one of my gable ends, which are the ones with the pointy roof, and it's going to sit on the board, and I'm going to add one of the side panels. So what I'm going to use to stick the panels down is royal icing, and this has been made with 500 grams of icing sugar and just a little water to make a really thick paste, and it's going to act as the glue. So what I need to do first of all is pipe some of this royal icing underneath so that it will stick to my board, and be quite generous because you want it to stick really well. There we go, and we're going to stick that down there. And then we're going to put some up the side of the house here so we can stick the side panel in place. I'm going to put some extra icing just to make sure there's plenty of icing on this panel here. And then some along the base where I'm going to stick the next panel of my house. There we go. And I'm going to put this pot here because what I'm hoping it's going to do is support the walls. Let's put it there. And this is when an extra pair of hands would be really useful, so it's the time to get the kids involved. And we're going to stick this one here along the base and just match up. Be quite generous with the icing. It doesn't have to look neat. Don't worry, it's all meant to look like snow, so you can be quite generous and it will help keep the house secure. So I'm ready to add the front of the house, which has had the door cut out. I'll just make sure I get the position right. And then I'm going to put plenty of icing on to make sure it stays in place. So it's going to need across the bottom. And down the two sides here, not the pointed roof. There we go. A little bit fiddly, but rather a lot of fun. There we go. And then we'll just very carefully put this one in place. I'm actually going to put a bit of icing on the inside as well here because I haven't gone far enough round. There we go. I just want to push that in. And I can always tidy up here where I've got a little bit too much icing. I'll just use my palette knife here to scrape off the extra. Across here. What I quite like to do is actually cover the entire board with this icing, and then it looks like snow, and then it's not so much of an issue if you've got extra icing dripping off. There we go. I'm going to allow this to dry for an hour before I put the roof panels on, but I mustn't forget to remove the jar before I do that. So I've allowed the house to dry for an hour to make sure that it was really sturdy before I do the final decoration. So there's a little seam along the roof that I just need to pipe some icing along. So it looks like it's been snowing hard. And as you can probably see, I went a bit crazy and covered the board in icing as well because I wanted it to look like a real winter wonderland scene, and it also covers up the foil board and looks a little bit more realistic. So the next thing I'm going to do is add the little extra bits that I've got here. Now I made these with the leftover dough that I had. So I've got a little welcome home doormat that I'm going to put in front of my house. A bit of this wonderful sticky icing there, and we can stick that on there. So I've got the door that I need to stick on here, and just a little bit of icing along the side here. It's not going to fall off, is it? Can stick that in place there, slightly open. And I got a bit carried away and I even did a little letterbox. So a tiny bit of icing on the back of there. And I can stick my letterbox in place on the front door. And I think a couple of trees in the garden would be nice. Now these ones I've simply decorated with a little icing sugar mix with water until it's quite thick consistency, and just piped a few Christmas decorations on there. Very simple to do. And some icing underneath so it's going to stick in the snow. We'll put one here. Looks good. And maybe another tree, I think. So another little decorated tree that I've got here. Plenty of icing underneath, so it looks like thick snow. Put that down, and I think I'll put that one, just turn that a little bit, we'll just put that one there. What I'm going to do now, and I think it's a really clever idea, is use these cinnamon sticks to look like logs outside the front door of my house. I'll put 2 here at the front, and then use a little bit more of my icing to make sure they stay in place. Not too much, just a little bit on there. So I've got that nice rough edge on top so it looks like real firewood. Now I've made some little piping bags here just out of greaseproof paper, and it's icing sugar and water, and if you want to add a little bit of food colouring, that's really great. So what I need to do is just snip the end off. Perfect. And this is going to be great for the finer details and for also sticking the sweets on. So one thing which is really nice to do is roof tiles, and I'm going to try and do this as neatly as possible and show you. It's just like doing lots of U's or W's side by side, whichever way you look at it. And then we go underneath. Just keep going down. And you could also use white chocolate buttons for this. There you go. It doesn't have to be perfect. There we go. And you can repeat the process on this side of the house as well. But what I'm going to show you now is perhaps using another colour. I think what I'm going to do is draw some windows at the front of here. So I'm just going to rotate slightly. And then I can just do a couple of windows on the front. A little bit more white. And now I need to stick some sweets on the house, otherwise it wouldn't be a gingerbread house. I'm just going to turn it around again so we can see the front a little bit better. And I've got a really nice selection of fun sweets here, and this is when the kids really would go mad and have some fun. So I'm just going to stick a few in random places. Perhaps one down there on an angle. And maybe some little people in the garden. So the next thing I'm going to do is use some of these jelly beans here to do like Christmas lights round the gable end of the house. So I'll start off with this one here. Some of this really sticky icing. And we'll just put that in place there. At this stage you can really let your imagination run wild. I'm going to spend some time on this house and really make it look fantastic. Right, that's it. Time to reveal what I've been doing. There we go. And just a final detail. I've got a little sign here for the front garden. Put that outside the house. And maybe just a little bit more icing sugar. Just over the roof and the chimney here, so it looks like it's just snowed. So I'm very pleased with that, as I'm sure you can tell. And that's how you make a gingerbread house.